Croissant badge, hidden heart. The night Maya Reeves pressed her back against the cold brick wall of the alley, gun drawn, heart hammering against her ribs, she was not thinking about the suspect hiding somewhere in the darkness ahead of her. She was thinking about the way Officer Dana Castillo had looked at her 3 hours earlier in the precinct parking lot, the way Dana's dark eyes had lingered a half-second too long, the way her fingers had brushed Maya's wrist when handing over a coffee cup, the way the touch had burned long after the warmth of the cup had faded. Maya had been a police officer for 11 years. She had stared down armed men. She had walked into burning buildings. She had held dying strangers in her arms and whispered that everything would be all right, but nothing, not one moment in her entire career, had made her hands tremble the way Dana Castillo made them tremble, and that terrified her more than any dark alley ever could. They had been partners for 2 years. 2 years of early morning shifts and cold coffee, and long silences inside a patrol car that somehow never felt empty. Dana was the kind of officer who remembered every victim's name, who stayed late to fill out paperwork so a grieving family could have answers sooner, who kept a granola bar in her jacket pocket because she knew Maya skipped breakfast when the cases got heavy. She had this habit of tucking a strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, and Maya had memorized it the way you memorize something you know you shouldn't, the way you memorize a secret you have no business keeping. Their partnership was efficient, seamless, almost telepathic, and then every single day, Maya walked into the precinct and told herself that what she felt was partnership, was loyalty, was nothing more than the deep bond that forms between two people who trust each other with their lives. She told herself this so many times that it began to feel like prayer, like something she was begging to be true. The city they served was not cruel, but it was not kind either. Millford was an old industrial town that wore its pride like a fading badge. People here believed in hard work, in tradition, in things being the way they had always been. The precinct reflected the town. It was a place where officers slapped each other on the back and talked about their weekends, and their wives and their kids, and where certain conversations never happened, where certain truths were quietly and efficiently buried under layers of professionalism and silence. Maya had understood this from her first week on the job. She had understood what it would cost her to be fully herself in this place. And so she had built walls efficient and invisible, and she had lived behind them for over a decade. She had dated men she did not love, attended department barbecues, and smiled at the right moments. And she had become so practiced at hiding that some days she barely remembered what she was hiding from. Then Dana had arrived, transferred from a precinct 2 counties over, and she had walked into the briefing room with her dark hair and her quiet confidence and her habit of asking questions that made everyone else think harder. And Maya's carefully constructed walls had begun, slowly and terrifyingly, to crack. It did not happen all at once. It happened in small, devastating moments. The night they sat in the patrol car outside a diner at 2 a.m, waiting on backup that was 40 minutes out, and Dana had talked about her childhood in New Mexico, about the red desert and the way the stars looked there, and Maya had realized she was holding her breath. The afternoon Dana had found her, crying in the women's bathroom after a particularly brutal domestic violence call, and rather than pretending not to see, as every other colleague would have done, Dana had simply sat down on the floor beside her and stayed, saying nothing, being everything. The rainy Tuesday morning, when their hands had reached for the same case file at the same moment and neither of them had pulled away for 3 full seconds that felt like falling, Maya had told no one. There was no one to tell. Her family back in Georgia still asked when she was going to find a good man and settle down. Her friends from college had drifted into their own lives. Her world had narrowed over the years, into this precinct, this city, this badge, and now into Dana, who represented everything Maya wanted and everything she believed she could not have, because it was not only about the precinct's culture or the town's traditions. It was about fear in its purest form, the fear of being seen, truly seen, after spending so long becoming invisible, the fear that if she reached for the thing she wanted most, she would lose the only life she had built, the only version of herself she knew how to be. The case that changed everything began on a cold, October evening when a series of threatening letters surfaced, targeting several city officials. Maya and Dana were assigned to the protection detail together, which meant long nights stationed outside a councilwoman's home, sitting in that patrol car in the dark with nothing between them but silence and the soft glow of the dashboard lights. Those nights were unbearable in the most beautiful way. They talked about everything except the thing that mattered most. Dana spoke about wanting to someday leave law enforcement and open a small bookstore, somewhere quiet, by a lake maybe, somewhere the sky was big. Maya listened and felt something in her chest pull open like a window. Nobody had opened in years, and the night air rushing in was cold and wonderful, and she was so afraid of it she could barely breathe. On the fourth night of the detail, a car that had been circling the block twice too many times became a foot pursuit that ended with Maya and Dana cornering a suspect in the narrow alley behind the councilwoman's street. It was during those frantic minutes, with radios crackling and adrenaline surging, that something shifted. When the suspect lunged, it was Dana who pulled Maya clear, wrapping an arm around her and spinning her behind cover with such instinctive ferocity that for a moment, when it was over, when backup flooded the alley and the suspect was cuffed and it was safe again, Dana did not let go. They stood there, pressed together against the brick wall, Dana's arm still around Maya's shoulders, both of them breathing hard, and Maya turned her head and found Dana's face inches from hers and Dana's eyes, looking at her with something that was not partnership and was not loyalty and was not nothing. It was everything. It was the thing neither of them had said. They did not speak about it that night. They filed their reports and drove back to the precinct and went through all the normal motions with careful, deliberate normalcy. But something had broken open between them that could not be closed again. In the days that followed, Maya moved through her shifts in a state of aching, suspended awareness, hyper-conscious of every moment Dana was near her, of the new charge in their silences, of the way Dana had started watching her when she thought Maya wasn't looking, when with an expression that was tender and searching, and a little frightened. The same expression Maya suspected was on her own face every single day. It was Dana who finally broke the silence, and she did it in the most ordinary, extraordinary way. She left a note tucked into Maya's jacket pocket. Not a letter full of declarations, but a single folded piece of paper with a lake address and a time and 3 words written in Dana's careful handwriting, if you want. Maya stood in the women's locker room holding that paper and read it 4 times and then sat down on the bench and pressed her hands flat against her knees to stop them from shaking. And then she breathed slowly, the way she had been trained to breathe in high-pressure situations, and she understood that this was the high-pressure situation her training had never prepared her for. This was the one that required not courage in the face of danger, but courage in the face of hope, which is so much harder because hope means something to lose. She drove to the lake on her day off. Dana was already there, sitting on the hood of her car, looking out at the water, and when she heard Maya's car, she turned around. And the look on her face, the relief, the vulnerability, the quiet joy of it, broke Maya open completely. They talked for hours, not about the precinct, or the case, or the careful performances they had both been giving for years. They talked about the truth, about how long, about how afraid they had both been, about what it meant to live inside a version of yourself that only tells half the story. The sun went down over the lake, and the sky turned colors neither of them had words for, and at some point, Dana reached across the space between them and took Maya's hand, and Maya let her, and it was the simplest and most radical thing she had ever done. What followed was not easy. It was never going to be easy. The precinct remained the precinct, the town remained the town, and they were careful in professional spaces in ways that required constant, quiet energy. There were colleagues who suspected and said nothing kind about it in private. Conversations they were not meant to hear. There were days when Maya felt the weight of it pressing on her like a hand against her chest. But there were also mornings when Dana brought coffee to the car and their fingers touched on the cup and they looked at each other and something passed between them that was theirs completely, private and unbreakable. A country with a population of 2 where every law was written in a language only they spoke. There were evenings at the lake house Dana eventually rented, where the sky was genuinely big, where Maya learned what it felt like to not perform anything at all, to simply exist in her own life fully and without apology. Maya Reeves had spent 11 years protecting other people's lives. It took her 2 years of partnership, one cold October alley, and one folded piece of paper to understand that the life most urgently in need of protection had always been her own, not from danger, but from the long, quiet diminishment of pretending to be less than she was. She had been taught that courage meant running toward the thing that frightened other people away. She learned, finally, that it also means staying in place while you tell the truth about who you are, even when your voice shakes, even when you cannot see what comes next, even when the only light available is the light coming from someone else's eyes looking at you, like you are worth every risk. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that love in all its forms deserves to be seen and protected and celebrated, please give this video a like and share it with someone who believes in kindness and in the quiet bravery it takes to live honestly. Your support means more than you know and helps stories like this one reach the hearts that need them most. Before this story ends, there is one small thing being asked of you. Drop a word in the comments below. Just one word that describes how this story made you feel. That single word from you could be the thing that helps someone else feel less alone today. Maya never did open that bookstore by the lake. Instead, she and Dana built something better, a life neither of them had fully dared to imagine, in a world that was learning, slowly and imperfectly, to make more room for love in all the forms it takes. And every morning when Maya pinned her badge to her chest and looked in the mirror, she saw, for the first time in a very long time, the whole of herself looking back.